The Haunted Hotel, ancient secrets of the cursed inn that trapped souls for centuries. Welcome, dear traveler, to another journey through the mysterious corridors of history here on Tales Labyrinth. Today, we unveil the terrifying legend of the Haunted Hotel, an ancient cursed inn that trapped countless souls. Stay with us until the very end as we explore this chilling tale from the depths of time. Your support through likes and subscriptions helps Tales Labyrinth continue bringing these forgotten stories to life for all to experience together. First, the traveler's arrival at the mysterious inn. The dusty road stretched endlessly through barren hills as three weary merchants guided their laden camels toward the setting sun ahead. Their journey had been long and treacherous, crossing territories where bandits lurked and wild beasts prowled under cover of darkness each night. As twilight descended upon the ancient landscape, they desperately searched for shelter before the dangerous hours of complete blackness engulfed them. Through the gathering mist, a structure emerged on the hilltop like an apparition, materializing from the merchants' collective prayers for refuge. The building stood alone, its stone walls rising against the darkening sky with an architecture that spoke of centuries past. Weathered wooden beams supported a sagging roof, and narrow windows glowed with dim amber light that seemed strangely unwelcoming despite promising warmth. The eldest merchant, a seasoned traveler named Bashir, felt an inexplicable chill crawl along his spine as they approached the establishment. His companions, younger men named Khalil and Rashid, appeared relieved to have found any shelter in this desolate wilderness region. The wooden sign, hanging crookedly above the entrance, bore faded symbols they could barely decipher in the failing light of day. As they dismounted near the entrance courtyard, an oppressive silence hung in the air, despite their animals' nervous shuffling and snorting. No sounds of other travelers emerged from within. No cheerful voices or clatter of evening meal preparations echoed outward. The very atmosphere seemed to press down upon them with an invisible weight that made breathing feel slightly more difficult. Before they could reconsider their decision to seek lodging here, the heavy door creaked open, revealing an impossibly tall innkeeper cloaked. His face remained shrouded in shadow despite the oil lamp he carried, creating an unsettling impression of features without definition. His voice emerged as a raspy whisper that somehow carried clearly across the courtyard, asking if they required rooms for night. Bashir's instincts screamed warnings that they should continue their journey despite the approaching darkness and their profound exhaustion after days of travel. Yet, his younger companions had already begun unloading their supplies, their enthusiasm for rest overwhelming any subtle sense of wrongness here. The innkeeper's skeletal hand gestured them inside with movements that seemed almost unnaturally fluid in the flickering lamplight's uncertain glow. Crossing the threshold felt like passing through an invisible barrier into another realm, entirely separate from the world they knew. The interior revealed a vast common room with blackened beams overhead and walls decorated with strange symbols unfamiliar to these travelers. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, but the flames within it burned with an odd bluish tint that provided cold rather than comforting light to the space around them. Second, whispers in the ancient corridors. The innkeeper led them up a narrow stone staircase that spiraled upward into darkness beyond the reach of his inadequate lamp. Their footsteps echoed strangely against the walls, creating multiple reverberations that suggested spaces far larger than the building's exterior indicated. Khalil noticed the walls felt ice-cold, despite it being the warm season, and moisture glistened on the ancient stones unnaturally. Each merchant was assigned a separate chamber along a corridor that seemed to stretch impossibly far into the building's shadowy depths. The doors were made of ancient wood, reinforced with iron bands that had rusted over countless years of existence here. Bashir requested they share one room, but the innkeeper insisted with quiet firmness that house rules required individual accommodations always. Once alone in his assigned chamber, Bashir examined the sparse furnishings with growing unease, settling deeper into his worried mind. A straw mattress lay on a wooden frame, a wash basin sat on a rickety table, and a single window overlooked complete darkness. The walls bore the same strange symbols he had noticed in the common area, seemingly older than any written language known. As he attempted to rest, whispers began filtering through the walls like water seeping through cracks in ancient dam structures. The voices spoke in no language he recognized, yet somehow conveyed emotions of desperation, fear, and endless sorrow beyond description. He pressed his ear against the cold stone, trying to discern words, but the whispers remained tantalizingly incomprehensible despite their urgency. In the adjacent room, young Khalil experienced similar phenomena, but interpreted them differently through his less experienced worldview and understanding. He convinced himself the sounds were merely wind moving through the old building's many cracks and compromised structural openings. Yet even as he rationalized the noises, his heart pounded with primal fear his mind refused to fully acknowledge openly. Rashid, in the chamber furthest down the endless corridor, found sleep impossible as shadows danced across his walls without source. The darkness itself seemed alive and purposeful, reaching toward him with tendrils that dissipated whenever he looked directly at them. His oil lamp flickered constantly despite no draft, and its light grew dimmer with each passing moment of the night. When Rashid finally summoned courage to investigate the corridor, he discovered the hallway had somehow transformed during the brief evening hours. Dozens of additional doors now lined both walls, stretching into infinity, each identical to his own chamber's entrance portal. The whispers had grown louder, emanating from behind every door, speaking of torments endured across centuries of endless captivity here. Third, the dark history revealed. At dawn's first light, the three merchants gathered in the common room, seeking answers and reassurance from one another's familiar presence. The innkeeper was nowhere to be found, but an ancient woman sat by the now dead fireplace, wrapped in tattered robes. Her eyes held depths of knowledge and suffering that spoke of lifetimes lived within these cursed walls she could not escape. She introduced herself as Salma, claiming to have arrived at this inn decades ago as a young bride traveling to her new home. Her caravan had sought shelter here during a terrible storm, and when morning came, they discovered they could not leave. The doors opened to the same courtyard, regardless of which exit they tried, trapping them in an endless, recursive loop. Over the years, she had watched fellow travelers arrive filled with hope, only to discover the horrible truth about their imprisonment. Some went mad within days, throwing themselves from windows only to awaken unharmed in their chambers each dawn anew. Others simply faded away, becoming transparent whispers that haunted the corridors, their essence absorbed slowly by the building's ancient curse. The inn, she explained, had been built centuries ago by a sorcerer seeking immortality through dark practices forbidden by ancients. He had bound his life force to the structure itself, feeding on the spiritual energy of those trapped within. Every guest who stayed became fuel for his continued existence, their souls slowly drained over months or years of captivity. The symbols throughout the building were binding runes that prevented any victim from truly escaping beyond the hotel's supernatural boundaries. Those who attempted to flee would find themselves walking in circles, always returning to the inn's entrance no matter how far they traveled. The surrounding landscape itself was an illusion, a pocket dimension created by the sorcerer's powerful and malevolent will. Salma revealed that the innkeeper was not a living being, but a manifestation of the sorcerer's will, an avatar designed to welcome new victims with false hospitality and comfort. The sorcerer himself dwelled somewhere deep within the building's impossible architecture, perhaps in a chamber that existed outside normal space. None who sought him out had ever returned to tell of what they discovered in those forbidden depths below. The only hope for escape, she whispered, lay in breaking the binding ritual that sustained the entire cursed structure and its creator. Ancient texts, hidden somewhere within the inn's vast library, supposedly contained the counterspell necessary to undo the dark magic. But finding the library itself was nearly impossible, given the building's constantly shifting internal geography and endless transforming corridors and passages. Fourth, the curse awakens. That night, the hotel revealed its true nature as the facade of hospitality crumbled away like ancient plaster from rotting walls beneath. The corridors began shifting violently, walls sliding aside to reveal new passages, while familiar routes vanished into solid stone surfaces. Screams echoed from distant chambers as other trapped souls experienced torments the merchants could only imagine with mounting horror. Bashir gathered his companions and insisted they search for the library Salma had mentioned, despite the dangers of navigating shifting passages. They armed themselves with oil lamps and makeshift weapons, though they doubted mere physical tools would protect them from supernatural threats. Their only advantages were their combined courage and the fresh strength they still possessed as newly arrived captives here. The building seemed to resist their purposeful exploration, creating obstacles designed to separate and disorient them at every possible turn. Staircases appeared that led to ceilings rather than upper floors, while doors opened onto brick walls or bottomless voids. The whispers grew to roars of anguish that threatened to overwhelm their sanity with each step deeper into the structure. In a forgotten wing, accessible only through a collapsed wall, they discovered a massive chamber filled with ancient scrolls and texts. This was the library Salma had described, its contents preserved through centuries by the same dark magic that sustained everything. Dust lay thick upon volumes bound in materials they dared not identify, and the air smelled of decay and forbidden knowledge accumulated over countless lifetimes of study and suffering. Khalil, who had learned reading from monastery scholars in his youth, began examining texts, searching for anything about breaking curses. Most were written in archaic scripts he could barely decipher, filled with references to entities and practices long forgotten. Hours passed as they searched desperately, while the hotel's attacks on their sanity intensified. With each discovery, they made closer to truth. Finally, Rashid uncovered a leather-bound tome that described the original binding ritual in terrible detail, accompanied by explicit marginal annotations. The sorcerer had indeed bound his essence to the building's foundation stones during a blood moon ritual centuries before. To break the curse, they would need to destroy the primary binding stone located in the deepest chamber beneath the structure. But the text warned that confronting the sorcerer in his sanctum would expose them to his full concentrated power unleashed. Many had attempted this desperate solution over the centuries, and all had failed, their souls completely consumed to fuel his continued existence. Yet remaining meant slowly fading into whispers themselves, so death in battle seemed preferable to an eternity of half-existence and torment without end or hope. Fifth, escape from the haunted refuge. Armed with knowledge from the ancient texts, the three merchants prepared themselves for a final confrontation with forces beyond mortal comprehension. They gathered materials needed for a protective ritual described in the tome, creating a circle of salt mixed with herbs. Salma joined them, explaining she had nothing left to lose after decades of imprisonment had stolen her entire life away. Descending to the lowest levels required navigating passages that seemed designed to break their spirits through oppressive darkness and claustrophobia. The walls closed in until they moved single file, then opened into vast caverns that shouldn't exist beneath a building. Strange, luminescent fungi provided ghostly illumination that revealed disturbing carvings depicting the sorcerer's original ritual and the countless victims consumed since time immemorial. The binding chamber, when they finally reached it, was a vast circular space dominated by a massive black stone pulsing with sickly light. Around it, the forms of hundreds of trapped souls swirled like smoke, their faces frozen in silent screams of eternal anguish. At the chamber's center stood the sorcerer himself, no longer disguised. His form simultaneously ancient and ageless, with power radiating like heat from his corrupted essence and twisted being. He laughed at their attempt to challenge him, explaining that their very presence strengthened him as their life force began draining automatically. The protective circle they attempted to create shattered under his will before completion, scattering their materials across the stone floor. Death seemed certain as his power pressed down upon them, crushing breath from their lungs and will from their hearts. But Salma, weakened by decades of slow consumption, threw herself at the binding stone with her remaining strength and desperate sacrifice. Her impact, powered by righteous fury and accumulated suffering, created a hairline fracture in the supposedly indestructible magical anchor point. The sorcerer's scream of rage shook the entire structure as his immortality became suddenly vulnerable for the first time. Bashir seized the moment, using the heavy iron lamp as an improvised weapon to strike the fracture with all his might. The crack widened as the stone's dark light flickered and dimmed, and the souls trapped within began escaping like prisoners. The sorcerer's form began dissolving as his binding weakened, centuries of accumulated age suddenly catching up to his physical form. With a final coordinated strike from all three merchants, the binding stone shattered completely, releasing a shockwave of spiritual energy outward. The entire hotel began collapsing around them as the magic sustaining its impossible architecture failed catastrophically and completely at last. They ran through disintegrating corridors as walls crumbled to dust, guided by the freed souls, showing them the true exit. They emerged into genuine morning sunlight to find the hotel reduced to ordinary ruins, its supernatural menace broken forever completely. Behind them, hundreds of freed spirits rose into the sky like doves released from lifelong cages at last. Salma's spirit appeared before them briefly, young again and smiling, offering silent thanks before ascending with her fellow liberated captives. The merchants continued their journey forever changed, carrying the memory of those who had suffered, so others might someday break their chains and escape. The ancient tale of the haunted hotel reminds us that courage and determination can overcome even the darkest supernatural forces embedded in history. Here on Tales Labyrinth, we strive to bring you these forgotten legends that illuminate the beliefs, fears, and triumphs of civilizations past. If this journey through time captivated your imagination, please show your support by liking this video, sharing your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribing to Tales Labyrinth for more historical mysteries. Together, we keep these ancient stories alive for future generations to discover and appreciate. Until our next adventure through history's shadows, may your own journey be free from curses and filled with wonder at the tales humanity has woven through the ages.